So you're looking for the best all-round everyday sort of motorcycle, well then you probably want a naked. They're fast, fun, relatively comfortable and relatively affordable, and there are plenty of new and updated models for 2023. So here are 11 of the best, and we're going to go in price order ascending from what I consider to be an absolute bargain up to the super expensive stuff, which is basically the polar opposite of a bargain. You see, the first bike on this list is Honda's revival of the famous Hornet name, the new CB750. This bike starts at just £6,999, which is less than most other mid-capacity naked bikes on the market, and yet you get a pretty impressive spec sheet. It's got plenty of power at 90 horsepower peak from its 750 parallel twin. It's fairly light at 190 kilograms curb. You get decent equipment like Nissin brakes, Showa suspension and Michelin tires. And it gets loads of impressive techie features like riding modes, self-cancelling indicators and phone connectivity that all exceed expectations at this price point. The only catch could be the looks. From what I can tell from the reaction in the comments of my videos, it's not for everyone. But if you don't mind that sort of angular modern vibe that's admittedly a little bit borrowed from its smaller sibling, then I'm sure it'll be a happy purchase for you. Fun, affordable and approachable, just like a budget middleweight naked should be. In fact, there's every chance that it could topple the king of this segment, and that's the Yamaha MT07. This bike has been a bestseller for many years, and it's easy to see why. The 689cc parallel twin is an absolute joy to ride, and it's way more fun than the 72 horsepower on the spec sheet would suggest, and that's mostly down to the super lively throttle response. But it's also delivered with very little in the way of technological intervention, because this is a super simple bike. No traction control, no riding modes, just ABS because that's required by law, and that's pretty much it. Now for some people that's a strength, the less tech involved the better, but clearly Yamaha are looking at bikes like the Hornet and thinking that they might need to do something to keep up. So for this year, it now gets a TFT display that offers some phone connectivity features, and so that goes some way to bridge that technological gap to the Hornet, but still, are people going to be willing to pay 500 quid more for less power, a more basic chassis, and less tech? Don't get me wrong, the MT07 is still a brilliant bike, and it's one that I definitely recommend test riding before you buy a middleweight naked, but I'll be interested to see the sales figures in 2023 versus that Hornet. And it's not just Honda who are trying to move in on Yamaha's market, there's Suzuki as well with their brand new GSXAS. It's pretty much following the same formula, so a new parallel twin engine with a 270-degree crank to give it a bit of growl and bark, decent yet affordable hardware, a TFT dash, plenty of tech, modern angular looks, and all with accessible and compact dimensions. It looks like another great option, and more choice is always a good thing for the buyer, but the only thing I'm a little concerned about with this bike is the price. You see, it hasn't been announced yet, but it is expected to be more around that £8,000 to £8,500 mark. So again, will that be too much of a premium over the Honda for essentially a very similar bike with a bit less power? Only time will tell, but I'm still looking forward to getting on one and trying it out, because perhaps it's got a little bit of that je ne sais quoi which makes it a better bike than the spec sheet might suggest. And also, while I think the looks are still going to be a bit Marmite, in my opinion they're a little bit better and more edgy than the Hornet. Now before we get onto the next bike, I just want to say a massive thanks to Brilliant for sponsoring this video. Brilliant is the ultimate way to learn more about maths, science and computer science, and the focus is on doing rather than just sitting and listening, which personally I much prefer. Two courses that I'd specifically recommend to fellow bikers would be Classical Mechanics, which has plenty of automotive references and examples, but also Physics of the Everyday, which is super interesting to anyone who's practically minded. But on top of those, there are thousands of lessons across a huge range of courses that will help you to level up. From casino probability to 3D geometry to cryptocurrency and astrophysics, there's pretty much something for everyone if you're of a scientific mindset. Now, not only will you get specific practical skills from it, but also learn how to be a better thinker all round and improve your problem-solving abilities. So head to the link in the description or go ahead and and type out brilliant.org/motobob to get started for free. And the first 200 of you will get 20% off Brilliant's annual premium subscription. So once again, a massive thanks to Brilliant for their support. And with that, back to the bikes. Now also entering the affordable middleweight marketplace comes KTM with their 790 Duke. Well, I say entering, but I kind of mean re-entering, because the 790 Duke was already in their lineup. A couple of years back though, they updated it and gave it more capacity and then renamed it as the 890 Duke. But now for 2023 it's back, and it's now being manufactured by KTM's Chinese partner CF Moto. And the idea, I assume, is twofold. So firstly, that reviving an existing design cuts down on R&D costs, and making it in China cuts down on manufacturing costs. So when the final price is announced, it ought to be quite a bit more affordable than the 890s, and potentially close enough to those budget middleweights to tempt buyers to spend a little bit more. But the other side of it is that if you make a bike at 95 horsepower, you can then sell it restricted for A2 license purposes, and they don't currently have a bike in the lineup of this nature. So if you're on a budget, or you're looking for an A2 friendly bike but with a bit of that big bike image, then this one looks like it could certainly be worth a punt. And again, I'm looking forward to finding out what this one's like on the road. In a similar ballpark in terms of price though, we've got the new Triumph Street Triple, and it looks like it's going to be an absolute blast. I was lucky enough to see it being unveiled at the factory in the flesh, and the new bodywork and styling really does give it a more muscular and mean stance, and it sounds like it's the same story under the covers. More power across the lineup and a more aggressive geometry for each of the bikes that should give it more lively handling. But perhaps the most exciting of the bunch is the new Moto2 Special, which is a nod to their involvement in the Moto2 Championship as the engine provider. It celebrates this partnership with a couple of absolutely banging new paint jobs, 765 of which will be produced each. As for the mechanicals, well, it's basically the same spec as the RS, but it adds some super premium Öhlins suspension and some clip-on style bars for a more aggressive and track-biased riding position. To be honest, it's only a bit of a shame that this Moto2 paint job, or something like similarly pop-in, isn't available as a premium paint option on the rest of the bikes, because I think it looks really damn good. Next up, we've got the Indian FTR lineup, which has had a bit of a refresh for 2023, and I think it's looking better than ever. Across the lineup, we've got the same awesome big 1200cc 120 horsepower V-twin, and largely the same chassis, but they have made some tweaks to the exhaust system, the braking setup, and also some of the bikes get a new round TFT display, which looks more in keeping with the semi-retro styling of these bikes than the previous gen's big rectangular slab. But for me, perhaps the most exciting update is the new direction they've gone in with the visuals. You see, the previous generations of FTR family have always had a strong aesthetic tie back to the flat track racing vibe. But for 2023, they've gone for a more colourful, sporty, naked bike look, and personally, I think it looks great. Lots of pops of colour that suit the lively riding experience that you get from this bike. Now, next up on the list, we've got the Moto Guzzi V100, which has long been a bike that I've been looking forward to riding, and that's still the case. You see, despite the fact that it was announced in 2021, I think, it's just starting to arrive in dealers at the start of 2023. But I'm still really excited to get a go on one, because it's a massive leap in development for Moto Guzzi. For quite a few years now, they've been fully focused on retros, but this is a much more modern affair with a new liquid-cooled engine, top-notch chassis components, and loads of up-to-date tech. In fact, you could even go as far to say that it's innovative with a new active aerodynamic system that uses these little winglet flaps to give you more protection at high speeds, depending on what riding mode you've got selected. Actually, I was a little bit conflicted about putting it on this naked bike list, because it does have a little bit of a mini fairing, but certainly when those active flaps are down, it's near enough a naked bike. Also hailing from Italy, we've got the new update to the Monster lineup with a super trick spec SP version. This looks proper good fun to me. You see, some of the bikes on this list get to pretty silly power levels, but this one maintains the more reasonable 111 horsepower in the regular base Monster, but it just adds some trick components to improve the weight and handling. So there's Öhlins suspension front and rear, Brembo Stylema brake calipers up front, a Terminioni street legal silencer, a lightweight lithium-ion battery, and Pirelli's new Diablo Rosso 4 tires providing a little more grip. all in all, it sounds like it'll make a significant upgrade over the standard bike, and the only catch, as always, is the price at just shy of 14 grand as opposed to the 11,295 of the standard bike. It's a big jump in price, but if you want the ultimate monster, then this is pretty much it. Now it's another massive jump up to the next bike at just under 20 grand, and that's the BMW M1000R. The idea of BMW's M bikes is to take an existing bike in the lineup and then give it the best of the best in terms of performance components, a bit like the M series of cars, of course. Now the S1000R is their top sporty naked, and while it's an impressive bike with plenty of real-world grunt, 165 horsepower doesn't quite cut the mustard in the world of super naked willy waving, where a few bikes do go well over the 200 horsepower mark. In steps the M1000R, and the result is, at the time of writing, the most powerful street-legal naked bike on the market with 210 horsepower peak. Plus, there are loads of chassis upgrades, brand new tech, and this awesome looking M Sport paint job. So is there a better way to spend the best part of 20 grand? Well, Ducati might say so with their updated 2023 Street Fighter V4. Admittedly, it's more like 21 grand, but it does look like quite the bike. There are plenty of new and updated features and techie bits that have trickled down from the Panigale V4 sports bikes, as well as a slightly larger fuel tank, which is welcome news as it's not exactly the most economical engine. But perhaps my favorite update is the new grey Nero paint job on the slightly more premium S model, which I think looks as good as the red, if not a little bit better. But if 20 grand sounds like spare change to you and you're looking for something a little more exclusive, then you could consider the awesome looking SP2 version, which got a lot of the same 2023 updates, or to take it up another huge notch, there's the Lamborghini Edition that was designed in collaboration with the Italian supercar manufacturer. 56 grand for this one, which is an eye-watering amount of cash for a motorcycle, so could it possibly be anywhere near worth it? Well, I've linked to my full video about this bike on the screen here, where you can give it a watch and make your own mind up. And if you're new here and you want to see more of the latest motorcycle news right here on YouTube, then hit subscribe, and I'll catch you in the next one.